that Catfish on Ice has woken up from its off-season snooze. Not a lot going on right now, as you would know. It's first week of August.
Kind of the dog days right now.
Dog days of summer. I feel it down here in Florida, but I think a lot of people feel it. But super excited to bring an episode to you tonight. It's episode 272 of Catfish on Ice with Chad Minton and Max Greenberg, and also Boyd Farish, our fellow third guest co-host who joins us from time to time. Will be jumping in later, a feature writer for Penalty Box Radio, one of the most knowledgeable Predators fans, follows writers you can follow and be with in the entire fan base. The guy knows his stuff. Can't wait to have him on the show. He's going to be joining in a little bit, probably in the next 15, 20, 30 minutes. But until then, let's lay out the table for you and tell you what we're getting into with this long break and in the middle of the offseason, since there's not a lot going on right now. But we are going – so I am a Back to the Future cultist. I mean, I am like a cult follower of that movie, and when I watch it, I watch all three in a row, even though I've seen all three of those movies. Where am I going with this, right? Here's where I'm going with it. Tonight, we're not going to just predict what we think the lineup's going to look like 2 months from now when they open the 2025-26 season. No, we're going to go 3 years into the future. We're going to get the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour, and we're going to predict what the Nashville Predators lineup will look like then. And I think that's a very interesting gap there, those 3 years, because if you look at a lot of these veteran contracts and where the veterans are on this team currently, 3 years from now, a lot of decisions will have to be made. Mm-hmm. And all I'm hearing, and it's positive, but all I'm hearing around the league and the people who cover prospect pools and scouts and stuff like that are saying the Predators prospect pool is legit. And that happens when you have 3 first-round picks in one draft. But not just that. Some of the draft picks they've made in the couple years before this year. And so that's going to tie into that conversation of 3 years from now. We can even tie it into, will Andrew Burnett save his job by then? Will he somehow right the ship? Will Barry Trotz right the ship? Will he bring the fan base back towards him? Because right now his approval rating cannot be any lower. Andrew Burnett's approval rating cannot be any lower. Will they somehow save their reputations with the fan base? We're going to get into all that. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really fun opening face-off segment that I can't wait to get into. But also we'll bring it back to current times. And we're going to talk about realistic goals that we have set for 2025-26, because that's really all I can think about right now, because there's not a lot of breaking news. There's not a lot going on. Free agency is come and go for the most part. There could be a random trade lingering out there. We do have Luke Evangelista. We have to do an update. There's not really much to update you on, really.
It's been silence.
Dead silence. I mean, there's nothing out there. I haven't even heard anything from an insider.
I haven't heard anything about arbitration, which I wouldn't expect by now.
And the last episode, which was, we did an episode a few weeks ago in mid-July, and Max, you were telling me this is normal, and it is normal, and it's still normal now. We're only in August.
The clock's ticking now.
We have to at least talk about, is the concern level raising a little bit? But other than that, there's really nothing current events-wise to talk about with this team and most NHL teams. There are some things going on in the league with some teams but with the Nashville Predators right now, there's really not a lot currently to really sink your teeth into. So we are going to set our realistic goals for 2025-26. Key word there is realistic.
Right.
Because as we all have kind of come to grips with, the Stanley Cup window is shut. It's been shut for a while. And who knows if this team can even Are they going to be a playoff dormant team for a long time? Are they going to be kind of what they were last season for a few years? Or was last year more of a one-off and they might actually be a lot better this year? Maybe not a deep playoff team, but maybe they can at least be what they once were, where they compete for the playoffs. What I feel like is put in an exciting brand of hockey, win or lose, put an exciting brand of hockey back on the ice. That was what was so hard for me to swallow last season with this team. It wasn't so much. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you lose as much as they did, that's still tough to swallow. But really, it's more about how they lost, how lifeless they were for so much of the season, how really just it was like pulling teeth to watch this team play night in and night out. There were times where it's like, man, I really don't even want to watch this team tonight. That's how I felt, and that was the first time I've ever felt this way about this team, and I'm not exaggerating there. I want, win or loss, I want them to put a more exciting brand of hockey on the ice. That's, I mean, just to give you a precursor. But I've got a set of realistic goals. But really, I mean, Max, we can kind of start it off with that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far into it, but part of what discussion we're going to get on when we get deeper into that conversation is it's hard to know at this point, what this team really is right now, where they're going to end up. Like, so that's a big part of what I'll talk about when we get into like my realistic goals for the team. Mm-hmm. At least mine. I'm sure we're all
very hard. It's very hard to put a pin on this team right now. It really is. Also, who are some potential risers in training camp? Who can raise their stock? Who can really impress? I think there's a lot of roster movement that can happen. You look at, we're going to put the projected lineups on the screen when we get there from a couple websites. It really shows you that there is a decent amount of spots up for grabs that coaches are going to have to kind of look at how training camp goes to decide. And it's not going to be an easy decision to make between certain players on you're getting this role to open the season, or you're not even starting the season on this team. Like, those kind of decisions are going to have to be made on the fringe. When I look at the fringe of this roster, I think there's a lot of competition going into training camp on both defense and among the forwards. I think there's a lot of competition among the fringe group. As you would say with most teams, your veterans are probably they're safe. I mean, they're no one's going to make some bold move and yank Jonathan Marchessault out of the top six or so. It just doesn't. It rarely ever happens that way. So, I mean, obviously, you never know if some drama could unfold, but for the most part, we're focusing on the fringe part of the depth chart and figuring out what could happen there, because I do think there's a lot of movement that could happen there.
Once again, without giving away too much, and I've talked about it before here and also on Predlines.com, is offense absolutely is what I agree with. On defense, there's a little bit of fringe competition, but I'm not nearly as much into what's going to happen at the bottom. I'm concerned. How are you going to shake up? How are you going to group all six of your guys, your top six guys on defense? That's what I'm mainly concerned about. How is Andrew Brunette going to fit that puzzle? Because that's an interesting setup that the Preds have right now on defense.
Yeah, it is. And then after that, really, so 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman, he's the GOAT. But that's the biggest hockey podcast, other than maybe Spit and Chicklets. But 32 Thoughts podcast is a way different format podcast. It's where you get your knowledge as a hockey fan. That's where you go. It's appointment listening. And when I found out that Spencer Stastny had a feature interview on their show talking about everything he's been through, quite honestly, anything else we talk about tonight's going to be minute in comparison to the impact and the importance of that interview that I actually just listened to before we went
I have
online
not
tonight.
listened to it, by the way. So obviously I heard what Chad said, but I'm in for some to hear some stuff. I haven't heard a second of it.
It's pretty impactful. It's pretty incredible that not only that Elliot Friedman and 32 Thoughts podcast platform Spencer Stastny, the biggest hockey podcast out there, so that maximum number of hockey fans will hear it. But for Spencer Stastny to be vulnerable and go on there and tell his story, a story that I didn't know about, and it just goes to show you that you can criticize players for their play. They sign up for it. It's a meritocracy in a lot of ways when it comes to you got to perform. It comes down to that no matter what you're dealing with. And that's kind of how the world works, unfortunately. We're all dealing with stuff. We're all battling with stuff. I mean, just walking down the street, you never know what that person that you're crossing paths with might be dealing with quietly inside. And that's kind of like what I got from the Spencer Stastny interview on the 32 Thoughts podcast. Whether you're a Predators fan, whether you're a hockey fan, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you don't even know why you're listening to it, you're not even a hockey fan, everyone should listen to this interview because it literally impacts every human being on this planet. We all have mental struggles. We all have tough days. We all have inner struggles. A lot of times we are our own worst enemies, us inside. That person you're talking to inside of you, which is you, is sometimes our biggest enemy. I can say that from personal experience. So we'll break down the thoughts more. And actually, let's do that to open up until Boyd gets in. And then Boyd is also one. He actually is the one that brought up really wanting to talk about this topic. So when he jumps in, we'll also. But basically, so the Stastny interview, and I'm just hitting bullet points here. You all should still go listen to it. I'm not going to give everything away. But, remember, Max, me and you were both like high on Spencer Stastny.
Yeah.
About he was one of the top prospects in the Predators prospect pool pre-Tanner Molendyk. And even when Tanner Molendyk came on board, when he got drafted, Stastny was like the most ready-to-go prospect. And even when he did make his Predators debut and got his first stint in the NHL, I remember watching the guy and thinking, is this guy a prospect?
Right.
Like, why is he such a smooth skater already? Like, who is this guy? Like, because it's not like he got drafted with all this fanfare like Tanner Molendyk was drafted. I mean, he kind of just splashed early on, and everyone was like, okay, Spencer Stastny, I see you, dude. I see you. Dude's a smooth skater, very balanced player. And then, we got the dreaded personal reasons, quotations in terms of why we weren't seeing him. Everyone was confused by it. We knew it wasn't due to gameplay.
Right.
We knew there was something going on, and me and you both said it on the podcast, Max. It's none of our business.
Right.
He's clear. Something clearly is going on in his personal life, and we're not going to speculate on it. We're not going to pretend to know. But clearly something's going on. And, it's so now Spencer Stastny has come out on the biggest hockey platform you can be on in the podcast realm, maybe in all, even because podcasts have overtaken television at this point in a lot of ways. He has made himself vulnerable and come out, and it comes down to your personal mental health. Without giving away too much, because I want everyone to go listen to it. And no matter what I tell you here, you should still go listen to it, because I'm not going to do it justice. This interview segment with the 32 Thoughts podcast is like over 30 minutes long. I mean, this isn't some quick little, Spencer Stastny's popping in to talk to us today. No, this is could have been an episode on its own. And it's very gripping and it's very powerful. And it hit me like a Mack truck listening to it, because I can relate to it, and a vast majority of people can relate to this and can relate to Spencer Stastny. One thing I will say is Mark Borowiecki, Boro, who we know is on the Predators staff right now, has made a major impact on Spencer Stastny, and you'll hear that in the interview. And Burrow is a big believer in Spencer Stastny. And one quote that really hit me hard is, let me share it right now. Quote unquote, Spencer needs to be proud of Spencer. The team believes in Spencer Stastny. His teammates believe in Spencer Stastny. The coaches believe in Spencer Stastny. They always have. But Spencer did not believe in Spencer. And that's something that I really took to heart in that interview more than anything. And that's what I mean. I've dealt with that. A lot of people deal with that. They battle with themselves within. And Spencer Stastny says in the interview a lot of times that hockey wasn't fun anymore. He thought he literally signed his retirement papers. It got to that level. But one thing that I can say about the organization is, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with his future, if he's going to make the team. I'm not saying he should get free passes or anything like that to make the team. He still has to prove it like every player has to. But the team has stood by him. He had to sign a qualifying offer, and he said, I'm not ready to sign that qualifying offer. I'd rather retire. That's how distant Spencer Stastny was from the game of hockey. You're talking about a guy who has played hockey his entire life, and he's immensely talented, one of the most talented people in the world at playing his craft. When you think about how many people can qualify to play in the NHL, the National Hockey League, he's one of the most talented in the world to play that sport. And he was not ready to sign that qualifying offer. So all I can say is, without giving too much away from that interview, is someone on his level was willing to be vulnerable. And then you take all of us, we're all blue collar people. We're all like, sometimes we feel like we're not significant in this world or we're not important or something. And just look at someone on his level who was going through that, went on the biggest hockey podcast in the world and told his story. Man, like nothing else really matters to me in the hockey world when I hear that interview. And so everyone should go listen to it. When Boyd gets in here, we're going to talk more about it. Max hasn't listened to it yet, so I don't expect him to. He'll listen to it later as well. But Max, just off the top, I know we're getting deep here, but a lot of people listen to our podcast who might be impacted by this. And so Max, just kind of give me your thoughts on how cool this is and how there's a lot of players in professional sports who they're privately struggling as well, even though we put them on these pedestals, and they're role models and they're superhuman strength and they're making millions and millions and millions of dollars. But in the end of the day, we're all human.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm, like you said, ultimately, when it comes to, things such as, making, a hockey team or, you getting a job or whatnot, you got to have, the ability and stuff, that no one should get a free pass, even if they're going through things, but, there's a way that, you can, stay true to, stay true to, stay true to, the values of what's needed to, do things such as play the sport, do the job, but also, be there for the player himself or just
Absolutely.
people themselves. And, by all counts, it seems like, the Preds have done that. And, that whole thing of, not, believing in yourself, I've been there before, I want to, I personally, I think everyone would like to say this. I personally believe, I'm starting to catch on more to myself and, put more belief in myself as I
love that, man.
As I get older, as I have a job now, I've, this, past year, this June was the end of June, actually was the first time I had held a job for over a full year, which was big for me. And then even, doing this stuff right here, on the, on the podcast, even writing stuff, I sometimes, I sometimes struggle to, believe if I should, submit a piece sometimes because I don't know how it's going to be received by,
I feel that same way, man.
The fans and, other people. Sometimes, you've never done this to me, Chad, and I don't think anyone ever would, or unless or under certain circumstances. But I'm also sometimes thinking of, is Chad going to think this is, a good piece or whatever? And luckily, you've always been very, approving and supportive of everything I've written on Predlines.com and anything like that. But,
You know what's crazy though, man? Like, so even like every time we do this podcast and, like we've done 271, but I always had that self-doubt creeps in. Like, what am I doing? Like, who's listening? Like, does anyone care? Do I suck at this? Like, but like that's always that inner, whether you want to call it demon, whether you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, that inner, voice is always like speaking against you, to tell you can't do it, but in reality you can.
Yeah.
And that's basically in the most basic terms I can put it, what Spencer Stastny was battling and still does battle. In his interview, he talks about he still goes to therapy.
I do.
I will share one other, and again, when Boyd gets on, we're going to get into this much deeper because I think this is the most important topic times a million on what we're going to talk about tonight. But Stastny talks about kind of when he realized what was wrong and what was going on. He talks about the Calder Cup playoffs with the Milwaukee Admirals in 2024, and they lost in the Western Conference Finals. And that was when he was like, kind of what we were talking about earlier. That was when he was like considered one of definitely top 5 prospects in the pool, maybe top 3.
He had played until he got hurt. He had played in the NHL playoffs for the Preds against Vancouver.
He was the most NHL ready for sure.
He was called up over Dante Fabro.
Yes, and he had earned it.
Yes,
and he just to talk about it. He talks about a major moment after the Western Conference Finals loss with the Milwaukee Admirals, 2024. And his defensive partner was Adam Wilsby. And when they lost, that round got eliminated for a second year in a row by Quecha Valley. He basically goes into the fact that he was not in a great place and he couldn't wait for it to be over.
Wow.
He wasn't checked in.
Wow.
He was so happy that hockey was done. And he looked over at one of his teammates, Cal O'Reilly, all-time great AHL player. And he saw how he thought he was doing his teammates a disservice because he was ready to be checked out already. And he saw someone like Cal O'Reilly who was completely gutted about losing. And that's when he realized he was suffering with this depression and he thought he was screwing over his teammates. That's kind of the place that Spencer Stastny was in. And I can tell you, not playing hockey, but just in my line of work, I'm in a leadership role with what I do. And there's days where I feel like I'm not at my best and I'm screwing over the people around me as well. And sometimes it's all just like dumb inner thoughts that don't even make any sense. Again, it's just me fighting myself. And you don't even know why. But anyway, like, I'm really like, whether he makes the team or not, of course, we'll see what happens. But I'm so proud that he wore the Nashville Predators uniform. And I of course, I hope that he wears it again in an NHL game. How could you not root for the guy? I'm rooting for the guy no matter what he chooses to do in his life. I don't care if he chooses to go make coffees at Starbucks. I don't care if he chooses to go be a trash guy. I don't care what he chooses to do in his life. I'm rooting for the guy, and I hope that he continues on what seems to be a very positive trajectory in his life, thanks to therapy and thanks to choosing to be vulnerable. That's the biggest thing. Everyone's always afraid to ask for help. That's kind of, like there's a lot of people out there who are too proud to ask for help. They just silently deal with it. They're like, you know what? No one wants to hear my problems. I'm just going to silently deal with it. And Spencer Stastny finally said, you know what? I'm going to ask for help. And he went to the NHLPA and got help. And he's still very close to his therapist, which he talks about in the interview as well. And so I don't think anyone has to ask me who the player I'm rooting for the most right now.
Right.
No offense to everyone else on the team who also probably has, maybe even similar stories. But I'm pulling for Spencer Stastny. I was always pulling for him, but I'm definitely pulling for him now, no matter what he chooses to do in life. Even if it's outside of hockey, I don't care. I look at the human. I don't even look at the hockey player. Like, rooting for the guy. And so everyone should go listen to that. When Boyd gets in here in a few minutes, we'll bring it back up because I want to talk about that. We'll get more into it. But until then, Max, let's cool down the temperature a little bit here and talk about more hockey-related things. And let's start putting out that crystal ball. Like I said earlier, I'm a Back to the Future nut. So if I could get in the DeLorean and hit it at 88 miles an hour and I could drive to, let's say, the season opener of, it's 2025-26, 2026-27. So that'd be 2 full years. The season opener of 2027-28. Would that be 3 years from now? Right?
No, that's 2.
Okay, so 2028-29.
Yep.
Would be 3 years. Thank you for correcting my math. So the season opener of 2028-29, I'm going to get in the DeLorean. I'm going to go there. And what is the starting lineup for the Predators going to look like? And the first thing we have to discuss really is the current veterans on this team.
Yep.
Who will be here and who won't? Because this is a multi-part question we got to answer, Max. So let's break it down into sections. I'm going to go to Puckpedia so I can look at the current contract so I make sure I have the right information. But
I would say of the guys we signed last year, like in the big free agency haul, the only one I can say I really think is going to be here is Brady Shea because his contract is just unmovable.
That's a really good way to start it off here is let's talk about the big three. I like to call them the big three. Not necessarily in the best, most flattering way right now, but I call them the big three because they were the big three free agency haul. No offense to Scott Wedgwood.
Right.
But they were the big free agency haul. And I'm going to put the Puckpedia Nashville Predators. I'm going to put that on the screen too for our YouTube viewers. Also hit subscribe on YouTube. But I'm going to put it on the screen, and Max brought up a really good point here about the veterans, which I call them the big three that we picked up in that 2024 free agency splash. So there you have it. And I'm going to go through it here. So we're talking 2028-29. Talking 2028-29, so 3 seasons from now. So we'll complete 3 seasons, and we'll go into 2028-29. That's what we're trying to predict into the future here. And let's just go down the list. Philip Forsberg will be in his second to last year. Safe to say he'll still be here.
Probably. I mean, I could see a scenario where at the end of his contract, nearing it, the Preds aren't, starting to really win. He may want out. Probably not, but my radar is up a little bit on that one.
I feel like he's a lifelong Predator, but again, we're really looking deep into the future. A lot can happen in 3 years. But interesting enough, 15-team no-trade list picks in for that season. Well, let's go down to Steven Stamkos. By that time, he's retired. That's an easy one.
Yeah, he's not going to be here.
If he even plays out his contract here. That's
Right.
a big if.
That's what Marshall at 2028-29, Marshall will have 1 more year left, but
I think he could get traded before that happens. Again, a lot of this is really having to predict how good or bad are the Predators going to be in these 3 years. That's really what you have to ask yourself to make this prediction right now. But I'm going to say that Jonathan Marchessault is still on this team.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to say
he's going to be going into a very interesting scenario in that season.
I'm going to say he will not be here.
15-team no trade list. kicks in there. He is 34. So I think this is very predicated on the Predators are going in the right direction if he's still on the team like I'm saying he's going to be. Ryan O'Reilly's definitely gone. I think he's probably retired by then. If he's not retired, he's playing 1-year deals with.
Yeah, he won't be here.
Whoever. He won't be here. Michael Bunting won't be here, probably. Eric Holla won't be here.
Cole Smith will not be here.
Probably not. Matthew Wood. Ooh, okay. Here's a good one, Matt.
Or Svechkov. I mean, you feel like they better.
Yeah, but again, this is a really tough way. I mean, we don't have a lot to go off on right now. Let's talk about Matthew Wood first. Not a lot to go off of. He's got one game in the NHL. Now, we're going to talk about it later when we talk about potential risers in training camp.
He has like 5. I mean, it's not much, but he's got a few.
But my point is, he's a tough one to predict here.
Yes.
He's got 2 years left on his 2-way contract. So you figure the next 2 years is really where he's going to be doing his NHL tryout, where he gets sent back and forth. He'll probably get recalled and reassigned back to Milwaukee until he can really prove it. And then maybe he can graduate by 2027-28. He gets his first contract in the NHL outside of his ELC. So 2028-29, if all is going according to plan, Matthew Wood is a top 6 potential player. So he's someone we can put if we're trying to predict the Preds' future lineup in 2028-29, Matthew Wood is someone who could be in the top 6 by then. He could be someone who could be the future replacement of some of these veterans who will be off the books by then, for sure. Fedor Svechkov, who is already my spotlight player in training camp right now, by then, let's hope he is a top 6 center for sure. We're hoping he's that this year, quite frankly.
My thought with Wood and Svechkov and the other rookies or younger guys we'll talk about is if the Preds have made any strides as a team that can develop these prospects, at least most of these guys will still be here at the very least.
At the very least. But we're going to try to actually kind of predict what the lineup will look like. But we're going to go through this list first. Michael McCarron. I know that I was so harsh on this guy last episode. Everyone thinks I'm a Michael McCarron hater, and I get it. Even when I went back and listened to the episode, I'm like, man, I was really harsh on this guy. He's not on the team by then.
No.
I can't imagine. Zachary Leroux, another really difficult one to predict right now. I mean,
one of those guys, at least for me, he better be here.
He's such a tweener, though. This year is it's hard to predict until I see this season coming up. This season coming up is a big one for Zachary Leroux because he is still on a 2-way contract this year. So, again, he can be sent back and forth from Milwaukee to the Preds if need be without worrying about having to put him on waivers and lose him. So, again, Leroux, much like Svechkov and Wood, is looking to be in that audition phase right now. Even though he did play a massive chunk of last season with the Predators, his NHL debut season. And, I don't really want to put too harsh of judgment on the guy because he played for a team that was just a mess. So, again, this season is a big audition season for Zachary Leroux, but it makes it really hard to predict 2028. 29 and where he's at by that point. Ozzy Weisblatt, what do we think about him?
I don't know.
Very undersized. So he's got an uphill battle.
Yeah.
I think that if he's still in the organization, that's cool. Maybe he's still playing for Milwaukee at that point. Maybe he's a random call-up every now and then. But I don't see him being a future consistent starter for this organization.
No.
And then you got Luca. Let's touch on Luke Evangelista. Then we're going to get Boyd in here, who just jumped into the stream. But Luke Evangelista, man, That's a big one. So let's get Boyd in here. He just joined in. We're gonna do our hellos. What's up, Boyd? How you doing, man?
Whoa.
What's going on, boys? How are you?
You're joining the conversation at the perfect time because we're doing the future 20. So we're trying to predict who will still be on this team. Maybe try to predict a good chunk of what the starting lineup will look like before the 2028-29 season. So 3 full seasons from now, including this upcoming season. And so we're looking at the current lineup on Puckpedia. We've gone through almost all of the forwards, but we've reached Luke Evangelista. And first of all, I want to tell our audience, Boyd Farish, who has been on the show a few times, a good friend of me and Max's. And I told you guys in the intro that Boyd is someone who is one of the most knowledgeable writers and someone who covers this team that you could possibly be following. So make sure you do that. We'll tag him in our social media post. But we're going down the list in order. So, Boyd, let's give you the floor on if you want to hit it up real quick, go through all the forwards on who you think will – let's just start simple. Who will be on this team going into that 2028-29 season? You can start at the top. I'll scroll up so you can see it on your screen there. You can start at the top with Philip Forsberg. Me and Max, again, already went through the list, and we were just getting to Luke Evangelista when you popped in.
All right. Well, as always, appreciate you guys having me. Always great to be back on the show. I think, obviously Forsberg, I think it's hard to say with Stamkos. Like, I don't see him as a guy who's going to walk away from a challenge. But if we're talking about going into the 28-29 season, he'll be a UFA. I don't think he gets re-signed. More than likely either he's retiring or, maybe goes back to Tampa on a,
good point.
Swan
song.
Swan song special.
Yeah.
But I think there's a pretty good chance at that point Marchessault probably wants to move on too. I mean, if we're thinking about the fact that, Nashville probably, is going to be deep into the kind of build phase of where they're going to be at. I think at that point, there's a pretty good chance Marchessault is willing to waive trade protection to go to someone who's, maybe a little further along in the process, a little closer to being a contender. Then you're on down the list. Pretty much anybody else who's not under contract at that point, outside of Wood, Svechkov, LaRue, and maybe Weisblatt, are probably still there. But the rest of them, I don't think there's any reason to think that O'Reilly, Bunting, certainly not Haula or Cole Smith would still be in Nashville at that point. Evangelista is going to be interesting. I think. Mm-hmm. His time to really step to the forefront as a productive forward has to come pretty soon. Obviously we've seen flashes of it. We've seen that he's got the skill, the capability, but for projecting, 3+ years down the line, that's him at 26 going into his unrestricted free agent year. I'm going to say no.
This kind of opens the floor. This kind of opens the floor on all of us kind of discussing the update on Luke Evangelista, which there really is no update. But, RFAs go into August, it happens a lot where, they're trying to figure out the term of the next deal and all of that stuff. Trotz has already mentioned that he, the organization is a believer in Evangelista, and it's just all about how long is this contract going to be. That's the holdup. But Boyd, is your concern level going up at all right now in terms of just right now getting the deal done? Or is it just like, these things happen, like calm down, everybody. He's going to be signed. He's going to be playing in this lineup this coming season.
Ultimately, will he be signed and will he be playing? Yes. Yeah. I think you would like to see movement, activity, conversation about it happening, just from the, you don't want things to linger. But there's plenty of time. It'll get done. So, I mean, I think if I had to guess, and then obviously this is me speculating, I don't think either party really wants another 1-year deal. My guess is Evangelista probably wants something that's going to walk him to his UFA years. And if Trotz is going to do that, he's probably saying, well, I'd like to at least get a couple of those UFA years out of it and not just take you right to unrestricted free agency and see you walk. So, we're probably looking at a case of, Trotz wants 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
And that probably brings the AAV down a little bit, you would think.
Yeah.
Where Evangelista, maybe looking for something more like a 3-year bridge that takes him right up to unrestricted free agency. And, I think if they can get him signed to that 5-6 year type of window, I think that's actually very interesting because, as some of these younger guys come up, as we've all seen, you've got to have a few guys that have been around, understand what it means to be a pro, preferably guys who can still produce at a pretty high level and, can kind of walk the younger players forward into their NHL careers. And if you can only get Evangelista signed to a 3-year deal, how many of these guys in the pipeline outside of the ones that have already sort of been further along are you really thinking are fully established NHL players at that point? We may not see Igor Surin in the NHL in North America for another 2 years.
Yeah.
And, then you still assume there's an adjustment period, keeping in mind, Igor Surin's, is he any older than Brady Martin at this point? Like, he's still extremely young.
He was 17 last year when he got drafted.
Yeah. So it is an interesting bit of business the more you kind of unpack it. Not so much about will he be signed for this year.
And it kind of makes sense that it's dragging out as long as it is because like you're laying it out, Boyd. This is, we're talking 5 or 6 years or 3 years, and I get it from Evangelista's camp's point of view. Like, I don't want to be trapped into a 5 or 6 year deal when I'm not even sure what the direction of this organization right now. I mean, you got a head coach that's about to be on the hot seat. He's already on the hot seat. They lose their first game. They're not going to even have to play their first game. And people are going to be like, fire Andrew Burnett. So,
if they have a bad game in the preseason, people are going to be howling.
Exactly.
And they already kind of are now.
So it's kind of like I see it from that point, like that. Unfortunately, the Predators are in a really ugly spot right now, and it's going to take a lot of years to dig out of this. And then when we look at these contracts right now, there's not a lot of long-term stability aside from Philip Forsberg. I mean, it really is that bad when you look at it. Like, we're looking at 3 years into the future, and I don't see a lot of stability at all. Like, I don't. Like,
well, I think the counterpoint that I would make, because I think that was sort of always the plan, was you would have, enough veteran presence to kind of carry this core, UC Saros aside, because he's signed until forever.
Yeah.
So to sort of carry them to the end of their run. And at that point, you're hoping, these guys that are right now 22, 23 years old are hitting their 25, 26 NHL stride. So it looks really unstable right now, but when you take that whole list of prospects, if you project even some number of them to be NHL players at that point of the 28-29 season, you really don't have a whole lot more holes to fill. Now, the giant question is, Philip Forsberg retires, you got to have a 40-goal player in the waiting.
Yeah. I will say, and I want to get Max in here too, but just talking about Luke Evangelista in the point of this exercise. So Boyd, if you said at the point of this exercise that he's not here for 2020.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of my initial thought, but then I started thinking about the contract a little more and what both sides are probably going for.
And it's not an easy question.
I think at the point of that season, if Barry Trotz gets the longer term, he'll be here. If it ends up being a 3-year, and it walks him to his UFA years, I think he's
So I'm gonna clip this video, this segment part of the video where you predict this, Boyd, and then some random jackass with 2 followers on Twitter is gonna bookmark it. And just be ready, Boyd, because in 2029, someone's going to quote tweet you and say, "You are so wrong, Boyd. You don't know what you're talking about." Okay, anyway.
Line it up next to all the other ones. It's fine.
Rant over. Okay. I actually, God, this is such a tough way. And then we're going to get to Max. I want to ask you, let's focus on Luke Evangelista before we get to the defense. Maybe I'm being hopefully optimistic, but I actually think Luke Evangelista is going to be a big part of the future of this team. Once they can get over this speed hump and figure out the details of this contract, whatever it ends up being, I think the next 2 years for Luke Evangelista is going to be some really impressive years from him that's going to give Nashville Predators fans some hope that finally we have a homegrown top 6 impact forward that we didn't have to go desperately sign in free agency or make a trade for. No, he's homegrown. He's here. We built him through the system. My savior is Luke Evangelista, and you can call me hopelessly optimistic or whatever, but and a lot of people are pushing back on me when I say this. I've said it a few times on social media or in articles. They're like, "No, Luke Evangelista is garbage. He's undersized. He can't put the physical game together. He's this or he's that. Whenever he plays in the top 6, he's invisible." Like, I've gotten it from everyone, and I sometimes he was. I was very critical of him at some points last season where he was invisible, but he finished pretty strong towards the end of last season on an entire team that was, frankly, didn't show up. So if we want to start criticizing players, let's criticize the veterans first in that regard, and then we'll get to guys like Luke Evangelista. But I thought he finished the season pretty strong. I have call it hopelessly optimistic, but I think that, and I'll eat my words, but when I watch this upcoming season, and I'll even give him the next season after that, because I figure he'll at least get a 2-year deal. He'll get 2 years with the Predators to show that he's the future. I think he's going to show us something very impressive. I'm very hopeful, and you brought this up, Boyd, just now about mentors playing around him to bring these guys up. Again, I'm very hopeful that in Steven Stamkos' very short run and probably not memorable run with the Predators that he's going to have compared to his Hall of Fame career with the Lightning, I'm hoping that his lasting legacy with the Predators can be being a great mentor to someone like Luke Evangelista. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm hoping Evangelista can do enough to get more consistent top 6 minutes this year. And I like the thought of him playing on a line with Steven Stamkos if it works and there's chemistry there. And who knows what can happen. I can see Evangelista being a good assist guy, like getting a lot of assists playing on a line with Steven Stamkos. And then but the elephant in the room is who's going to play center, of course. But that's why. So I'm gonna say that he is a big part of this future, and he is on this team going into 2028, 29. And not only that, but I think he's a big core player of this team by that time. So that's what I'm gonna say. Let's go to you, Max, on Luke Evangelista.
Wow, I thought I was going to be the only one being maybe irrationally optimistic about Luke Evangelista. My opinion is kind of in line with your thinking, Chad. As far as the whole contract situation goes, last time we were on here 3 weeks ago, we talked about, our levels of worry at the time. Chad, you were definitely more worried about it than I was. And, at the time I was kind of like, it's part of the process. Let's not worry. It's going to happen. Ultimately, I still very much expect Evangelista to be on the Preds this year. I'm not at full-blown panic at this point, but you're getting to the point now. We're in August, and I said that 3 weeks ago, once you get to August, you start to, the urgency starts to set in more and more. And, we're at the time where, the clock is ticking and, training camp is going to be here before we know it. The two sides got to figure something out quick. And I imagine, here in the next few weeks, probably it'll pick up. Although, wait, he's not even Evangelista's not arbitration eligible, is he?
No.
Yeah, that's another thing. Okay.
He's just on a qualifying.
He could be an RFA going into December, right? In the deadline in December sometime.
Yeah, I think that's December 1st.
Which obviously we don't want obviously we don't think it's going to go that far.
no,
we don't think it's going to go into the season or anything. I'm just saying, like, technically, you can keep an RFA's rights into December.
Yeah, but
he would you would still own his rights. Just if you sign him after December 1st, he can't play that season.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
Either way, my main worry at this point, it's probably not going to happen, but you never know, and it's happening more recently.
But 2028, 29, Max, what do you think?
Hold on, I'm not there yet.
All right.
With the contract situation, the big worry there, though, it probably doesn't happen, although it's happened more often in the past few years than ever before. It almost seems you never know if some other team is going to swoop in with an offer sheet. That could always happen. Preds got to be wary of that. Make sure it doesn't happen. So ultimately, I expect it's going to happen, but the urgency's got to be ticking up here pretty soon. Going to the point about the future, I am going to be optimistic and say that Evangelista is a part of this future for a while. And I kind of agree. I was going to say what you said, Chad, about, him having a strong end of the season finish once he was given, a bigger role with, guys like Forsberg, O'Reilly, Marceau, getting a top 6 opportunity. I liked what I saw when he first came from Milwaukee in the, he played like a month and a half for the Preds in 2022-23. I thought he looked really good, at least for what we expected of him. 23-24, thought he continued to show progress. This past year, obviously wasn't what we wanted to see in terms of overall progress until he got a bigger chance in March, and he took it and ran with it. I partially take credit for it because a few days before I wrote an article saying why we should be concerned about Evangelista. Then he starts to do much better. I would like to say that I reverse jinxed him to some degree there, because all it takes is me calling a guy out, and then apparently they start to play better. So there's that with Evangelista. But in all seriousness, I think that I'm going to choose to believe that he's going to continue to keep this going. Obviously there's the thing about him being undersized. He's going to have to, if anything, obviously he can't control being undersized. He's going to have to, round out some elements of his physical game. I thought he got taken off the puck fairly easily a lot last year.
He did.
In a lot of games. I remember I was actually in when I went to the on the games in the game on one of the games in Anaheim and also the game in LA. He didn't play the game in LA, but the game in Anaheim, I remember thinking about like, wow, he got taken off the puck quite a lot in that game. And I was like near the blast.
But I feel like that's the next step in his growth as a hockey player. And I think, you don't have to be a highly physical winger to be a top 6 winger in this league. He has to make up for it with his offense, and he has to uptick. But like one of the things I look at is, and then we'll get past Evangelista. We really got to move on here. But one of the things I get with this criticism of Evangelista from a lot of people is that he just hasn't proven it yet. And I'm like, guys, like he really hasn't gotten the opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, he's played 172 games NHL. That's a lot.
That's not much.
But it's a lot in terms of it is a sample size. But 1350, or he's averaged 14-17 of ice time in his career. He's played very few top 6 roles in his career yet. And look at who he's played with. No offense to all these players he's played with, but like, and he still has produced, man. I mean, he still has 86 points in his NHL career. Yeah. It's not like the guy has showed up and just done nothing.
Right.
I mean, he's had really extremely good flashes. If all you had to criticize him on right now is he hasn't proven it in the top 6, which he hasn't gotten the opportunity to really, and 2, he's undersized, well, then for me, you're fighting a losing argument, and I'm not going to listen to you. Yeah. Like, now we'll talk again after this season. We can have this conversation again, and maybe I'll change my opinion on Luke Evangelista. But where we sit right now, those arguments are invalid for me when it comes to Evangelista. But this is a big prove-it year for him in terms of, and if he gets a decent contract, he's going to be under the microscope, and fans will criticize him heavily if he does get a top 6 opportunity and he completely falls flat. And I'll be right there with it. I'll think it'll be deserved. But still, the guy is so early in his NHL career.
I mean, I think.
Do you want to touch on it real quick, Boyd, before we move on?
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, what you're looking for from Evangelista, you're not looking for him to go from, in the mid 30s up to 70 points. I mean, obviously you'd love to see that. That would be great. But, to him to make that jump from, the 30s to like threatening the 50s.
Right.
And, which just, that's a couple more points a month. Really,
I'd love to see a power play presence from him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had 39 in 2023-24. That's just a few more points on the season at that point.
Yeah. And I very quickly looked at the game logs while you guys were chatting there, and you are correct. He closed the season pretty strong. In March he had 9 points in 15 games. Okay. In April, in the final 8 games, he had 7 points.
What about
8 games that mean nothing, but still, that is progress.
But it was also like, I remember like just watching, because like towards the end of the season, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. It became increasingly more difficult to watch this team night in, night out, especially when they were playing late at night. And I'm on the East Coast.
Well, it wasn't just the end of the season.
But it's still my team. I still watched them. There were nights where I stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning because as many of you guys know, I work a night job. So sometimes I would get off work and watch the team on demand, on repeat. And so I wouldn't live tweet. I wouldn't even like check my phone because I wanted to come home and watch them. And then I would give my reaction the following day on the game. And I'll probably have to do that again this season on a lot of occasions. But either way, I would still go home and watch this team. And I do remember, and it did give me the benefit of being able to like rewind and kind of slow down the games because I'm not watching it live. And I do remember Evangelista I just thought he was playing with a lot more confidence, and maybe that was because there wasn't as much pressure because the team was already way out of the playoff picture. And at that point, like, the reins were off and they were just letting guys play and just see how you can play. But I thought that he was skating with a lot more confidence and he was making things happen around him. That I think that's what he's going to have to show this season more consistently if he wants to play in the top 6. Because if you're going to play in the top 6, you got to make everyone around you better to justify being up there. And like, let's save it. We're going to get back to this because we're going to also talk about our who can. I kind of want to get into some lineup projections for this season from Daily Faceoff and NHL.com and kind of like briefly touch on that. We can get back to it, but let's round out this topic real quick about 2028-29. Evangelista really hung us up, and that doesn't surprise me.
Can I say one more thing, and I promise you one. What, Boyd, did you have a chance to potentially look at what he had from March 22nd and on? Because that was the game he was put in the top 6. And if I remember correctly, if I did my math correctly, I thought he was about a point a game from that game on.
It was close. Yeah. I mean, he definitely had more production towards the end of March going into April.
Yeah.
So he would have been, for those last probably 11 games of the season, he would have been pretty close to a point a game.
Yeah. I mean, one final thing I'll say, and then, I promise we can move on, is, I do believe that, the next step in his game, besides the, points, I do believe, a big part of the next step of his game is, again, not saying he has to be a totally, physical forward, but I do want him to see get a little stronger. The puck not get taken off as often. You don't have to be a totally physical guy. And I'm not saying that ever's going to be Luke Evangelista's game, but not everyone can be like Patrick Kane where you're not physical at all. And no offense to Luke Evangelista, but he's not Patrick Kane. He doesn't have the skill to get away with that.
All right, let's get to the defense. I agree with you, Max, though, for sure. Like if there's a fair critique of Luke Evangelista's game right now, it's what Max just said there, as far as getting bullied off the puck as much. Like that needs to happen for sure. All right, the defense here, again, we're predicting 2028-29 season, not his current season. We're jumping way out there right now. This is going to be even. Like, I look at the first player, I look at Roman Josi, our captain, and of course with the health diagnosis, I don't want to pretend like I'm a doctor and I know what to expect, because I don't. All I can go off of is what the team is saying and what Roman Josi's saying. He's managing the diagnosis that he has. which the acronym is POTS. Don't ask me what each letter stands for. All I know is it affects his brain, it affects his nervous system, it affects getting up and standing up and doing a lot of things that hockey requires you to do, which is what scares me. And he's had concussions in the past, and hockey is such a brutally
worry me almost more.
It's just a brutal, physically demanding sport, and all it takes is one hit against the boards, and that's what worries me when it comes to Roman Josi. But if he says he's ready to go and he's a warrior, which I've always known Roman Josi's a warrior, and he's ready to play, then I'm all for him and I'm all behind him. And I have already said, I think I said it in the last episode, if Roman Josi is 100% ready to go like he says he is, and this unfortunate disorder he's dealing with does not affect him that much, or doesn't it maybe only affects him as much as he's always dealt with it, I think he can be a 70-point player this year again, just based on assists alone. 40, 50 assists, 55 assists. The guy is a playmaker. He can just pile up the assists. He's probably not going to score as many goals as maybe he was before. He's a defenseman, so he's never been a huge goal scorer, but he's always been good at setting other guys up, and he's always been a big power play guy, of course. But going to 2028-29, look at that, guys. He is a UFA at that point. So what happens with Roman Josi for the point of this exercise? Let's ask Boyd that.
Honestly,
he probably retires, right?
That's what I
think he's probably going to retire.
Yeah,
I
he's
think
35.
The 27-28 season is going to be his swan song around the league.
We might already know it at that point, and hopefully he goes out in style. He goes out.
I mean, if stuff's going to get better with his health diagnosis and the concussions, maybe he's forced to. I mean, I certainly hope it doesn't happen, but there's a non-zero chance he's forced to call it quits before his contract's.
And that's what I'm worried about. Like, does he even make it? And like, we're not going to try to predict that. Yeah. But at the same time, that's worth bringing up. But either way, for the sake of this exercise, he retires. He is not part of this team anymore. For the sake of 2028-29, he probably retires, goes out in style. The organization honors him on the same level that they honored Pekka Rinne. Roman Josi, along with probably Shea Weber, they're like, for me, they're my big three when it comes to this organization's all-time like great players. And so I truly just hope with everything in me that he is able to go out on his own terms and he's not forced to retire due to this unfortunate disorder he's dealing with. But if he can make it through the 2027-28 season, I don't even care what his point production is. I don't care. Just like, obviously I don't want him hurting the team at that point, but like if he's still able to play and help benefit the team, and he can get through that last season, play out his contract, and then retire and get the standing ovation around the league. And it's going to be, one of outside of Pekka Rinne, that's going to be because, Shea Weber didn't finish his career here. But if Roman Josi can finish his career here like that and not play for anyone else, wow. That'll be like truly just incredible to watch. There will not be a dry eye in the house when he plays his last game. If we know it's his last game going into it, last season or last game at Bridgestone Arena, like that will be very emotional night for sure. If we know his retirement's coming after that, but so Brady Shea, let's get to the next one. So we think Roman Josi will be retired by then. Brady Shea and Max, you kind of already touched on this. So we'll start with you, and then we'll get with Boyd on this one. This is going to be another tough one to predict. But Brady Shea, he's got that long 7-year contract that he got in this free agency splash in 2024. What do you think? Do you think that we're trapped with him, so he'll be here?
Yes. I literally think that the biggest reason he'll still be here by then is because the contract is just in move unless he's bought out by that point. And I know it's a really pessimistic take, but I do not have high hopes for that contract aging well. For lack of a better term, I think it's going to age like milk.
Ooh. All right. What about you, Boyd?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll probably still be here, and he'll sort of take over the, assuming in the next 2 years. I mean, he's going to get more comfortable and find kind of his more consistent role in the lineup. I mean, if at that point, he's sort of taking over the Ryan McDonough role that, we had in Nashville a couple seasons ago, it's at the point that the cap is going to be at that point, which will be, north of 110 million.
Right.
It's
$7 million will be choke change.
It's not going to look as bad. And
that's a good point.
So for 28, 29, I'm less concerned about it, going out to 2031. Oh boy.
But he'll be the elder statesman.
37. Yeah.
I think best case scenario is, like you just said, Boyd, he's the elder statesman of the room. He's the Ryan McDonough role. He's the kind of the guy who holds the defensive room together, type of thing. And so, but I think we're all in agreement that he's probably going to be on this team by then, with that long contract. And let's hope that last season was just him not being comfortable here yet, and like the rest of the team didn't play well. So it's not just a Brady Shea problem. It's an entire team problem last year. So let's hope that those remedies have been fixed, and that maybe he shows us something this year.
And I will say, to play devil's advocate, for Brady Shea, defense is one of those things, especially in an Burnett system, that takes the longest to learn. And he didn't have at any point like an optimal partner last year. But I'll just say, from the time that was, even when he was signed, that was the one contract that I and probably everyone else was like, that's pretty steep, and probably a player that's, in all honesty, not worth that much money. And last year just didn't really do much to change that opinion of mine.
So let's have some fun here. Like, now we can talk about some newer players that just got signed. So Nick Hague, essentially the replacement of Jeremy Lauzon, like literally in the trade. That's what happened. We also lost Colton Sissons in that trade, but either way, which I'm totally fine with. I'm a big Colton Sissons fan, but you had to move on from that contract with him going into his contract year. But Nick Hague, so he is signed. That will be the last season of his current deal, 2028-29, as we're predicting this lineup right now. And he will, look at this, modified no trade clause kicks in the last 2 years of this deal. 16 no trade lists, according to Puckpedia. I think that he's definitely a big core player of this team by then, whether you like it or not.
I don't know.
I think so.
I don't know. Again, that's another contract too, where I'm very scared of how it's going to age, because last year he got his first opportunity to play non-sheltered minutes for Vegas, and it did not. I mean, at least his underlying numbers were pretty bad. That's another contract where
here's why I have hope for it. I have hope for it because he's 26 years old, so maybe he just needs new scenery. Maybe the best is yet to come. I think he can settle down and play a pretty basic role with this team, which is a second or third line guy. Even though I've heard Trotz say, did I read this right? That someone said that Trotz thinks that he can be top pairing material.
I don't think you're totally wrong. I don't know if he said exactly that, but I do. What I remember hearing was Trotz saying, "Yeah, we paid him a lot of money. He's going to play like he was paid."
I'm gonna go on a limb here and say he's probably going into a interesting trade bait year in 2028-29, even though he'll have a no trade list. But I think that he will still be on this roster when that season comes along. I'm gonna say that.
I would say that too. Again, but I think that kind of falls. Honestly, let me take back a little what I said. I know I'm kind of being pessimistic and talking out of two ends or a lot of ends of my mouth here. I honestly see more of a situation where Brady Shea is more worth that contract than Hague is. I kind of see it in the same light where it's so immovable that I don't see a way he's traded.
All right, what do you think, Boyd, about Nick Hague?
Yeah, I mean, and I was just sort of, I was sort of flipping through the non-roster players that are on the way up. I mean, and you're looking at
you have to look at that
of the ones that to be significant NHLers. You're looking at obviously Tanner Molendyk.
Right.
You assume Adam Wilsby's still around at that point, but I mean, he'll be 27. He'll be in his UFA years. And then, you're looking at a guy like, who just got drafted, Cam Reed. So, if you assume by that point, those three are regular NHL capable, you got to figure they're pushing someone. You have to figure they're pushing someone out. And the most easily movable in that scenario is Haig. Obviously a very different type of player than any of Molendyk, Reed, or really anyone else in the system, save for Jacob Rombach, which I wouldn't assume he's going to be at that point just yet. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think Shea's going to be hard to move unless, he's almost impossible to move unless he just decides he's ready for a change of scenery. So I'd say, being that's the last year of his contract, he'll be pushing 30. I think there's a pretty good chance Haig gets traded at that point.
All right. So I say he'll be on the team, but he'll be going into a very interesting final year on the contract. Max and Boyd think that he's gone before then. That's a tough.
No, I think Haig is here because I honestly have to disagree with you, Boyd. I don't think that contract is going to be very movable at that point. I really think it's going to age poorly.
I mean,
it's such a tough call.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, again, what is a $2.5 million defenseman today is a $5.5 million defenseman in 3 more years. And a $2.5 million defenseman today is not that hard to move, and it's not a huge pill to swallow to even eat some of that money for if it's for 1 year.
That's true.
So I mean, I'm just and it's not a value judgment on Haig as a player exactly as much as just looking at the score sheet of who's coming, where they're going to need to fill spots. And, if someone's going to get pushed out of the lineup, it's easier to push Haig out than it is Shea.
True. Yeah.
All right, let's go down to another player. We just signed Nick Perbix from the Lightning, a guy that I really, really wanted before the Predators actually went on and got him. So at least I can pat myself on the back that we got one guy that I kind of wanted. I like Perbix a lot. I like his game. I'm down here in Tampa, so I actually watch a lot of Tampa Bay Lightning games as well. Preds are still my number one. I won't even call myself. I've kind of adopted the Lightning as my second team because I live down here. But I appreciate Perbix's game a lot. I like his role that hopefully he will play for this team as a second or third pair defenseman. I think he's going to be a good stabilizer for the team, which is what we really need. We really need that for the defense, guys, because I think last year there was just way too much volatility, and there was a lot of defensive breakdowns. There was no chemistry. There were nights
hurt.
There were games where I felt like they put up a good effort. They did everything they could, but there just wasn't a lot of structure. And as you say, Boyd, they were all hurt. That didn't help anything. But I like Perbix's role on this team. In terms of 2028-29, he'll be a UFA before that, unless he just absolutely shines with this team, and then they re-sign him. Because at that point he'll be around 30 years old. So who knows? We're basically have to predict how is his time going to be here, and will the organization be so pleased with how he's played that they give him a really decent pay raise to sign him before he gets unrestricted free agency, way before we get to 2028-29. That's kind of what we have to predict when I'm looking at his 2-year deal here for 2.75 AAV. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say he's still on the team too.
Wow, that's bold. I mean, just going pure logical. He's only signed for 2 years, and he's probably mainly a depth guy. I personally can't I personally feel like I can't go out on a limb and predict that he'll be here, but I would love for him to, because again, I'm with you. I like his game and I like what he brings.
I'm just looking at outside of Tanner Molendyk. I'm looking at the prospect pool for the Predators, and I don't see a lot of guys that I see guys who have chances to make big impacts eventually on the defense, but I don't. I don't see. You got Cameron Reed, of course, but who knows how many years he is away from being ready. And I was a big fan of the Cameron Reed pick. He was on my target board going into the draft to take him later in the first round. I never thought Cameron Reed was going to slip that far in the first round. He was kind of like projected to be top 20 from a lot of the draft boards I looked at. So even though I wanted Cameron Reed, I didn't think he was going to slip to where the Predators ended up picking at number 21. But either way, like I don't know where Cameron Reed will be at in his development in just 3 years. You have to play the long game with a lot of these prospects. But you got Cameron Reed and you got Tanner Molendyk in terms of who I see in the prospect pool on defense, who I can feel super confident will be around by then. So Ryan Ufko is an interesting.
I will not stand for this Ryan Ufko era, sure.
No, I'm putting him on the fringe.
No, I mean, I think if you go through kind of the same calculus we just went through on the left side of, who's coming up and who's going to be pushing people out of spots. I mean, on the right side, you're looking at, basically 3 other players outside of Perbix as it exists today. Obviously, there's 3 years of, who knows what Barry Trotz might do. But you're looking at Justin Barron, who at this point, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Because I am not in agreement. We will come back to that.
I don't think the list gets very hard after Perbix. Like, I think they're all gone.
Then it's Ryan Ufko and Andrew Gibson are the most,
I'm sorry for leaving out
specifically
Andrew Gibson,
on the right
right
side.
Specifically
on the right side. Obviously, there's more guys left-handed.
Do not shortchange Nick Blankenberg.
I'm not shortchanging him. We're talking about 2028, 29.
I see what you did there. Shortchange. Nicely done. I think if you look at it that way, if you assume out of those 3, Barron, Ufko, and Gibson, 2 of them are, at that point, pretty much for sure NHLers. And assuming, Perbix holds his role well.
That's what I'm assuming.
He's not going to end up being he's not going to go from a 2.75 to an $8 million defenseman.
Right.
He might go from 2.7 to 4.5 or 5, which everybody, again, is going to have to come to grips with. The cap is higher. Salaries are going to be more. And, and if you can roll him again on another 2 or 3 year deal, that's not the worst thing for a guy who's
what I'm thinking. That's
big, pretty mobile, can handle the puck pretty well, can just, even if he drops back down to the lineup because, someone else passes him by, like, it's not the worst thing. Like, it's paying someone like Perbix upwards of, 4.5 in the future. That's only a problem if you're at the cap limit, which at this point in time, I can't see how that's humanly possible for Nashville, given the youth that is, right behind the core of the team that's aging. So I think there's pretty decent rationale to that Perbix would be around, with the, caveat that unless somebody else better comes along, but
we're literally doing this exercise with no idea what Trotz will do on the free agency market or trade market. We're just doing this for fun, looking at this current roster, and trying to predict who has staying power, basically. That's really what we're doing right now, is figuring out who's going to be here for the long term and who is their days are numbered in the next 1 or 2 years, basically. But so Justin Barron, Jordan Osterley, Andreas England, and Nick Blankenberg, we're just going off of what Puckpedia has as far as the current active roster. We're not talking about prospects, but all right, let's give Blankenberg his due, Max. And look, I'm right there with you, Max. Like you don't have to preach to the choir to me because I'm right there with you. But I just don't see him making it all the way to 2028, 29.
Probably does not.
He'll probably go to another team. He'll still be in the league. I think he'll still be playing his role. I think I see Nick Blankenberg as a guy who's probably going to get a raise, and the Predators are not going to pay him, and he'll go somewhere else where a team slightly overpays for him. And I'll be happy for Nick Blankenberg that he does maybe get overpaid a little bit. And I don't see the Predators investing in him long term.
No, I mean, I think, my thing with Blankenberg, and I wrote a whole article, and I'll still die on the hill. I think Blankenberg's actually a really solid player, at least based on what he did this year. Again, it wasn't in a small sample size. It wasn't, against, just, third pairing guy, like, lower end guys on the roster. No, he played against, legit opponents. He I wouldn't say he was a total difference maker, but, he was definitely made his contributions, for the Preds in good ways. And, I would say the biggest thing with, Blankenberg is you hope, and maybe that's the decision you make at the upcoming trade deadline, is you either pay him or trade him. If we go into next year and lose him for nothing, assuming if he goes into 20 this year and has really comes way back down and is clearly not as good, then okay, then I can, I'll accept that I'm wrong and this past year was a fluke. But, assuming he stays on a fairly similar trajectory, maybe even slightly worse,
I just think he's going to get pushed out.
The one thing that would piss me off more than anything is if he's walks a free agency for nothing.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I just think he's going to get pushed out. I think he's eventually going to get squeezed out to no fault of his own. But I get where you're coming from in terms of letting him walk in free agency for nothing, maybe try to find trade value out of him at that point. I get all that for sure. Boyd, what do you think about Nick Blankenberg? And then we got to get to the goalies and we got to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think along the same lines. I mean, he's a useful defensive player. There's a lot of things that he does that provides value to a team. I just think for a roster that is continuing to turn over the next 3 years, I don't see where a 30-year-old Nick Blankenberg is on that roster.
Yeah, I think he gets another 1-year deal somewhere else. He'll stick around the NHL, and he deserves to stick around the NHL. I just don't think he's going to get the long-term deal with Nashville, or even a multi-year deal at that point. So let's get to the goalies real quick, and this won't take nearly as long, but still interesting. So,
pretty easy answer on this first one.
Yeah, you see Saros.
Yeah.
He's going to be the goalie, right? Look at that deal. Yeah. It's just kicking in this year. So his new shining contract kicks in this year. $7.74 million AAV, no trade protection, no movement clause, all the way to 2033. So yeah. And then backup goalie, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you're gonna really ask me. I mean, I do. Boyd, maybe Boyd or Max can come to my rescue. What was the name of the goalie that I really liked they drafted?
Jack Ivankovic.
Yes, I actually really like him. Well, maybe he's ready to go as a backup by then.
That's possible.
Like the guy. I like his scouting report. I really like. I love the pick. We were all waiting for the Preds to go goalie in this draft. We thought that they might do it in the first round, but with one of their 3 picks. But maybe he's ready to go by then as a backup.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, UC Saros will start next season as the 10th highest paid goalie in the league.
Wow.
Yeah, he's grossly underpaid. He always has been. and
granted, that still technically counts Carey Price, but yeah, he is the 10th highest paid goalie.
That's one of the guy, but yeah.
That's a really good little nugget you just dropped in there, Boyd. I appreciate that, man. That's cool. All right, so that took
for a
us
guy who was a Vezina finalist like 3 years in a row. Like, yeah, he'll be all right.
That took us an hour and a half to get through, but I mean, I wouldn't expect it any other way because that was a hell of a opening face-off topic. That might be a new record for Catfish on Ice for an opening face-off segment. Nearly an hour and a half with no ads, other than what Spotify throws in on me. No ads, no nothing, just straight hockey talk predicting 3 years from now. If I bat 200 on my predictions, I'll be happy. Okay. Anyway, let's get to the next segment here. Let's set some realistic goals for this season. Let's get into current times here. Realistic goals. I'm going to start, guys. I'm going to actually just for the sake of time and just conciseness, I'm going to list my 4, and then you guys can nitpick that, and then you guys can do your goals. So mine are pretty straightforward, but these are very grounded. Like I'm being super realistic here. But these are my personal goals. When I asked myself this question today, preparing for the episode, these were the first 4 that jumped to my mind. Just me talking to myself, like realistic goals that'll make me happy if this happens this year. My first realistic goal: break 90 points. Even if they miss the playoffs, I'll consider that a major win because that means they're at least going in the right direction. And I know that'll put us right back to where they used to be, where they're a 90-point team, not a great draft pick. I get all that, but you still have to go off of what they're doing. That would be a 22-point improvement in the standings if they got 90 points. I'd be happy with that. Back to Evangelista, my second realistic goal. Evangelista gets re-signed, which should be easy to meet that goal, and solidifies his role as a top 6 winger for this organization. That's a realistic goal of mine. My third realistic goal is the 2024 Big 3 free agency haul of Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea. Earn the trust of the fan base. I don't know if that's realistic, but, let me at least throw that out there. And then my fourth one is I think a lot of people are going to be on agreement with this one. Saros returns to being a true Vezina caliber goalie, which it takes a team to win. It's not just all on him, but he did have some games where he just wasn't locked in. He wasn't his true self, and carries the Preds to more wins. And what I mean by that is, if you want to be considered an elite goalie in this league, sometimes you have to overcome the circumstances around you. That's what puts you in the elite tier. Is you can say, you know what, my team sucked around me, but I still got us this win. He didn't do that enough for me last year, and I would love to see him do that this year more often, where he plays hero role a little bit more, and he can jump back. He can remind everyone that he is a top 5 goalie in this league. That's my most important realistic goal for me. So those are my 4. Guys, how do you feel about my realistic goals? Boyd, do you think those are fair, realistic goals?
Yeah, I think those are.
I try to keep it realistic.
Fair.
I'm not trying to go crazy.
90 might be optimistic, but
yeah,
I think that's part of the challenge.
That's still missing point. Right, that's still missing the playoffs.
Could they chase a playoff spot this year? Absolutely. Absolutely, they could. Could they bottom out again? Absolutely, they could.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's so unpredictable.
Anything is possible.
As far as I see it with the team, I have 3 goals kind of along similar lines, but I think a little different. For me, I think, the first goal of the year for me is I want to see some real progression from the young guys. Evangelista, Svechkov, LaRue, even a guy like Justin Barron. I want to see some progression. I want to know, is the future of this team in good hands? Do we have guys in our current system we can depend on? Do we have some guys, here in Nashville that are progressing? And if they are, that puts potentially, less pressure on guys in Milwaukee. Maybe not quite as on the guys individually, but that puts, a little less pressure on not every single guy has to absolutely pan out, because not everyone will. So I want to see a head start on the development of the youth here in Nashville this coming year in 2025-26. Next on the list, I want to see some bounce back years, mainly from a guy like UC Saros, as you talked about. You want to see him, obviously he probably won't have it totally easy in front of him, but as you said, Chad, yes, you'd like for him to, really elevate the team, instead of just going off of like, oh, well, the team in front of me sucks. You're an elite goaltender. You got to show it at a certain point. Yeah. I want to see it from Saros. Other guys, I want to see Forsberg bounce back. He's going to, be here for the long haul. I want to see everyone bounce back to some degree, although I have higher expectations for some of those guys and others It's actually an article I'm about to write for Predlines.com. I'm not going to get too into right now, but I'm going to write an article basically talking about the star players and the likelihood I think of all those guys bouncing back. So I'll kind of save that for a while. But the next goal I have, and this is probably going to be some laughs here, figure out what the hell you are as a franchise. Don't be stuck in this middle ground of, are we a playoff team? Are we not? And, Boyd, I've seen you make the point before, and I think it's a good point. I think one strength Trotz has shown is, being able to adjust on the fly. If things change and you see an opportunity, you can pivot, and I think that's good. Same time, though, you can't be flip-flopping back and forth. I want to see, if this team is going to seriously make a push, let's maybe that. Ideally, maybe most likely, at least what I'd like to see is I would hope this team goes in the other direction where they really try and build for the future. And hopefully, that includes, maybe making some trade at the deadline, maybe trading a guy like O'Reilly, if you can get a good deal for him, maybe trading a guy like Bunting. Heck, as much as I like him, maybe trading a guy like Blankenberg if there's an opportunity there. Really, ideally, here's how I'll say it most clearly. Figure out a direction for this franchise, but ideally, hopefully that direction is really investing in the future of this franchise and really going in that direction.
Well, I think that's what Trotz is saying he plans to do. But I totally am on board with that realistic goal of we got to come out of this season feeling like we're out of the desert, because I feel like this entire franchise is kind of stuck in the desert with no direction of where we're going. That's how the fan base feels right now. And regardless of where they finish in the standings next year, what you're touching on, Max, if I understand correctly, is you want a direction, you want a clear path. And I think that's going to be hard to really answer unless they make a head coaching change. I'm just throwing that out there. Because I think a lot of the fans don't want Andrew Brunette here anymore. And so unless this team just goes on a heater and starts winning a lot of games and starts overperforming what people expect out of them, the fan base is going to continue to want Andrew Brunette out. And so no one's going to be satisfied on what this team is until the head coach is gone, Yeah,
I think there's, ways you can especially make it work. If you see some progression, I think here's one path.
How does he coach up the youth? Which is what you said, Max. That's going to be a big litmus test for Andrew Brunette.
Here's one outcome. Maybe this is optimistic. Here's one outcome I could be okay with for this year. Andrew Brunette stays around, and you see some progression. You see progression from the young guys, and you're kind of stuck in the middle as far as the standings go. But Barry Trotz decides, you know what? This team is not winning a cup. Let's try and trade some of the guys that we can and gain capital for the future. And now we're better set going forward.
That's a good way to put it.
That's an outcome. If that happens, I'll be happy.
That's a good way to put it. And I think that's actually a pretty likely scenario too. I like that realistic goal from you when you put it that way. That actually makes it more crystal clear for me what your thinking is. All right, Boyd, what about you, man?
So when I think about the upcoming season, I've got a couple things that come to mind. One, the Predators were, for a multitude of reasons that have been picked apart to death and beyond. But they were a negative 60 in goal differential. Wow. So I just went through and looked. Exactly half of the league had a positive goal differential. So realistic one, at least get back to even.
Good.
Maybe that's a tad optimistic. So maybe realistic is get better than like negative 10.
Yeah. At least be close.
That's
such an eye-opening. That's such an eye-opening goal differential. And I remember seeing that as well throughout the year. How drastic their goal differential was, and there were nights where they just. It was like the game was. Like they would just get ran out of the building on the. It wasn't like they were losing a bunch of close games. They were just they failed to even get an overtime point a lot of times. Like they just fell apart in the middle of games for a lot of different factors. But yeah, that's a good one. Boy. I like that.
So there's a number of different things that go into that, and I'll probably come back to some of them in a minute. My second is for it's for Andrew Brunette. I kind of have a couple for him. Like I will freely admit my default is I put the onus on the players 90% of the time. They're the ones on the ice. They're the ones that have to perform, regardless of system, regardless of line mates, what have you. The players have to perform. But I think there's a couple of things that I would like to see more of and probably more consistency with from Andrew Brunette. One is to get back to the system that we saw kind of in his first year, which I remember attending training camp and watching them working their breakout drills from the defense, from the defensive end, and seeing a way of attacking through the neutral zone that you didn't see much of anywhere else. And they just lost that completely last year. And they could not get out of their own zone at all. And again, part of that is defensive injuries and rookies and new players and blah, 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 blah. But that ability to attack out of the defensive zone and spring forwards to create those rushes, that's the getting back to that style is, something realistic because we've seen them do it, and just creating that on a more consistent basis. The other part that I want to see from Andrew Brunette is utilizing more skill set matching in his line combinations. So, especially when you look at the top six, finding someone who can really distribute the puck with someone who can forecheck, with someone who can shoot. And it's a bit of a challenge because there's a little short on distributing players at the moment, but just finding those combinations, and then, especially with the lowered expectations this year, at least going into the season, let them cook. Let them play it out. He fell into, the Laviolette line blender way too commonly last season.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was a bit out of necessity, but sometimes it was just, I don't like the vibe of this over three shifts.
Sometimes
switching it up.
Sometimes you don't have a choice. I get that too. But yeah, I was calling that out very early in the season. I saw it coming where he was just
that's one thing, honestly. And I think that's definitely true. That's one thing, honestly, and maybe that's just for me following the Preds. That's one thing I become a little less critical of coaches in general, because a lot of coaches, when lines aren't, working well over a few games in a row, they're going to tend to switch it up. And granted, I think what you were you touched on this point as well. I think the Preds didn't have the personnel to just be running the same lines game after game after game. They just didn't.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. There's got to be a middle ground in that. There.
Yeah, I mean, and what it kind of turned into, because I remember we had a stretch, I don't know, it was like in November, December, when they ran out Forsberg, Stamkos, Marchessault, and they rocked for about 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
Until everybody adjusted, because the rest of the lineup had practically nothing. And you just couldn't, create anything at all. And so I think that's where, you've got to find those combinations, especially because there's going to be younger players coming in. You've got to give them a little bit of an opportunity, a little bit longer, to see if it works and have a little more play there. My last sort of realistic, and this is the level of realism is maybe waning a touch as we get closer to the season, but they've got to find another answer at center.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock on Ryan O'Reilly. It's not a knock on Svechkov. What the team more than anything, and it was going to hold them back more than anything, especially as, you look at like this 3-year plan that walks Stamkos to the end of his contract, Yossi to the end of his contract, and someone like Forsberg, who's going to be starting to get a little bit older and is not going to be able quite as effectively to just run through dudes and create his own goals. You've got to have someone in the lineup that can get them the puck in a position to score. And whether that's Marco Rossi or whether that's Mason McTavish or whether that's somebody else that shows up, along the trade wires along the way. I think you've got to find someone who can be a distributor up the middle that can give. I mean, if you look up and down the existing roster and the guys that are coming up, there are dudes who can score the puck. There are dudes who can shoot. Not many of them, though, create their own goals. And you've got to have someone who can get them the puck in a place where they can score. So that's, sort of my quasi-realistic challenge for Barry Trotz to figure out is, someone who can, hopefully longer term, like a Rossi or a McTavish, but someone that can be that creator in the middle that makes all those goal scorers on the outside more effective.
Yeah. I got it on the screen here, the NHL.com's projected lineup for this season. And I mean, they got Ryan O'Reilly projected at, just to go off of what Boyd's talking about, you have to find a center, or find a true answer at center. And I mean, this is why everyone thinks the Predators are going to be another lottery team, is because you just look at their center depth. And I mean, outside of these four, and you got Stamkos who can play a little center as well, but you'd rather him not. I mean, you just got nothing. I mean, this is no offense meant towards these guys, but let's just be realistic here. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly should not be a top line center at this point in his career, as much respect as I have for him. Fedor Svechkov's a big question mark, and you're thrusting him into a role that we're not sure if he's ready for or not. Eric Holla, I mean, I don't even know what I have to say about that. And then Michael McCarron, honestly, is probably most fit for his role out of the four we just named.
Yeah.
I mean, at least we know he can cook at the fourth line. I'll give him that. I was pretty harsh on him in the last episode, but I will say at least we know he will be fine down there, and he'll do just fine. But I mean, and you look at the prospect pool. I mean, in terms of this coming season, there's not really anyone that's ready that we can expect. So, as much as I love the Brady Martin pick, and I think it's gonna be just fine when it's all said and done in a couple of years, I'm not nearly as upset over that pick, even though I did want Porter Martone probably more. But I'm still really happy with that pick. Not to go off on a tangent here, but yeah, you look at what the Predators have to deal with their center depth, and it's the main reason why no one has much hope for this team anytime soon. You got to have center depth, and they have nothing right now. And just God forbid if a couple injuries happen to that unit or that position, then you're really scrambling. You're really in a lot of trouble. So I don't know. But if your realistic goal comes true, Boy, that they find an answer at center, I will throw a parade on Broadway for real. I'll be there for it. I'll be there for it. But all right, good stuff. So yeah, there's that. And then also, just for the sake of it, this is the NHL.com's projected lineup to put on the screen for the defense. And they, again, projections, and these are all just, but I'm just going off of the reputable sources of NHL.com and Daily Faceoff. And they got Nick Hague playing with Roman Josi on the top pairing, Brady Shea with Nick Perbix on the second pairing, Adam Wilsby, Justin Barron on the bottom pairing. We'll see. I mean, I think there's a lot up for grabs. It's going to take us into our next segment, guys, and then we're going to round this episode out coming up on 2 hours. Extra long marathon episode because we've taken such a long off-season break that we wanted to give you a really long-form episode for you tonight. No ad interruptions. We did get renewed with DraftKings. The Hockey Podcast Network did this upcoming season. But that doesn't start till September. We're not saying don't use DraftKings. DraftKings is the GOAT. They're our GOAT sponsor. But I don't have an ad read for them until September. But either way, guys, biggest potential risers that could come up in training camp who could work their way up into what you would call projected lineups. And I'm going to put Daily Faces.
According to that, Nick Blankenberger is going to be a riser.
There you go.
I mean,
there you go, Max.
I
will not. I will
just
never
love you
have
sticking to the
my
bit, Max.
getting Nick Blankenberg up on a high pairing on this team is never going to stop.
I love it. I mean, look, I like Nick. I love his game. He was one of my most fun players to watch towards the end of the last season. I was always excited to watch him play.
I will go as far as to say this, and you can have me on record saying this months later if it happens. If Nick Blankenberg is re-signed by the Preds, I'll get a jersey.
All right, well, that's fair.
Do it.
But hey, look, Max,
Listen,
calm down for a second.
Almost every jersey I own is somebody who's not on the Predators anymore.
Calm down, Max. Look at this. So let's go to Daily Faceoff. They have Nick Blankenberg on the second pairing with Brady Shea. So there you go. But I don't know if Daily Faceoff, I don't think they're checking their stuff right now because I can't imagine Justin Barron being on the top pairing with Roman.
No. Going to what Boyd was saying earlier, so I'm going to backtrack a bit. I'm not going to stay on this long. I was not a huge fan of just Barron from the eye test last year. I thought he really struggled defensively, although he has an absolute cannon of a shot. Didn't think he did a ton as facilitator, although he did a little bit. But his underlying numbers were better than I expected.
Well, he has a lot of speed, too.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the edge stats, which I love looking at the NHL edge stats, because you can look at like speed bursts and fun stuff like that. I'm not saying it all matters, but like Justin Barron also has some speed to him. The problem is he is an absolute crater on defense.
Yes. I would say in terms of the future, again, I'm not going to stay on this long. In terms of the future of this team, if there's one player I'm neutral on as far as like I need to see one more year to figure out what I think they're going to be, that's Justin Barron. I'm very curious about him.
I'm curious as well, but also we want to talk about going on rants and talk about Max like he keeps going back to Nick Blankenberg. Do not get me started on how bad this organization did Alexander Carrier. And guess what? Now he's on Montreal Canadiens and they absolutely adore him and he looked happier than ever. And he has also thrown a little shade at this organization, which is well-deserved.
You're right. 100%.
What the hell were we doing, guys?
Yes.
This is no disrespect towards Justin Barron. He was just part of the trade. But I have a hard time being excited about Justin Barron because I know what it's attached to. And that was losing Alexander Carrier. I'm not happy about that.
The way that was dealt with was all over the place at the least.
Yeah,
well,
you're not going to talk me into that.
And not specific to Carrier because I have my own opinions on that, namely that they shouldn't have re-signed him in the first place.
All right.
But well, they should have traded him at the prior trade deadline. But
that's a good point.
Yes, but again, we're not going back too far.
But I think where we saw the, what is sort of the good and the bad of Trotz right now is his willingness to pivot is, based on, new information, I think is completely a good thing because you do get some GMs that get too stuck in a plan that isn't going there. Buffalo. And, so having the willingness to say, new information is presented, I'm willing to adjust the direction. I do think this past season he was a little overreactionary in some of those pivots. And, it probably backed himself. He backed himself into some corners he didn't have to back himself into yet. He was a little too quick on
some unforced errors for sure.
Whether it was Carrier or whether it was Tomasino or, those two specifically probably. But, I think that's probably the thing that, hopefully he learns going forward is that just because he sees a decision down the line that may down the line be the right decision, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it today.
Yeah. So I think Fedor Svechkov is the biggest obvious answer in this question of biggest risers in training camp because the organization is looking towards him to be ready to basically, I feel like he's about to go through what the same test that Tommy Novak went through. Like, can you be our savior? Can you fill this massive void that we have? And we need someone to come save us so that we don't have to, here's my thing, even if Svechkov does pan out and he's great this year, they're still very thin at center. He's not the only end-all be-all that we need to work out here. That's how ugly the situation is for the Predators at this very important position. So, but I think he's a big spotlight player in training camp because he needs to have a strong camp. If he has some type of a lackluster camp where Andrew Burnett doesn't feel good about his game or something's going on, there's not chemistry, they can't figure out where to put him, that's going to really send this whole lineup into a ripple effect of what are we doing here? Are we going to have to move Stamkos to center? Like it's going to not be good. So Svechkov for me is definitely the most important X factor in terms of having a strong training camp. But you look at here, this is just daily faceoffs projections with the forwards. And you look at a player like Matthew Wood, who got a very brief stint last year, a little taste. Do we feel like he is a guy who definitely needs one more year of marinating in the AHL before we can really depend on him for consistent NHL minutes? What do you think, Boyd, on that? And then we'll go to Max on that.
I think it makes sense for him to start the season in Milwaukee just to get a few more pro games under his belt. But I was actually pretty impressed with his game overall.
I was too.
During his stint.
I was too.
He looked like someone who, tries to use his size, tries to get to the net, tries to get to the areas where to score.
He hit the post a couple times. I remember.
The puck gets off his stick. That's someone that you're going to want working in at the NHL level.
Do you feel like he's
somewhere
a player
down the road when Howla or Bunting, almost assuredly gets traded at some point?
Do you feel like he's a player that could really benefit from this training camp, though, in terms of maybe moving up the depth chart a little bit if he just really performs at a really high level?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. I think outside of him, I've probably got two potential risers. One for different reasons. One is the guy Barry Trotz loves to talk about, the man, the myth, the ginger, Reed Schaefer.
Oh, okay, good one. Yeah, I haven't thought about him.
And really what that comes down to is he was actually having a very productive season in Milwaukee. I thought he was very close to getting called up before he got hurt. And if he comes in, healthy,
whose spot would he take?
You're looking at probably do you move Cole Smith a little earlier? Do you move Eric Howla a little earlier? If someone's better, you make the move.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
So, and that's someone who, he's big, plays a straight line game. You don't have to try to force feed him top 6 minutes to get the best out of him. So he's definitely someone I'll be watching. And the other really is Tanner Molendyk, because there was a lot made about him playing on the right side, and he played on the right side, I guess. I think in the juniors playoffs. He's really been working hard on that side because there's a lot of depth on the Predators' left side, and if he can walk in and play the right side and be effective, that completely changes the conversation about what the Predators' defense is going into the season.
And just to refresh everyone, because I get confused over this all the time, what's since he's a junior hockey league player, OHL player. He's now age 20, so I'm almost positive he's AHL eligible.
Yes,
that's where it gets confusing when it comes to a player like a Brady Martin, who is you can't send him to Milwaukee basically. He has to go between the NHL and his OHL team, and so if a player like Brady Martin were to play in the NHL, it'd have to be a very brief stint, or you'd have to stay up basically that's how it works in a nutshell.
Yeah, he can get a 9-game stint in the NHL and be sent back to the OHL. The one interesting thing in the new CBA is they did carve out where a team can have a 19-year-old. They can have one 19-year-old in the AHL.
Yeah.
What I don't know offhand is based on Brady Martin's birth date if he qualifies for that.
But I have seen people bring that up, like with this new CBA. I'm glad you brought that up because they've talked about Brady Martin could be an interesting one for the Predators, not this season, but next season in terms of that new CBA thing. So yeah, it's something to keep an eye on down the road. So I love those picks. Another one. What about Ozzy Weisblatt? I mean, he's another one who the organization seems to really like.
That's one.
He's got a high motor. Yeah, go ahead, Max, on him because just me personally, he's got a high motor. He plays the Barry Trotz way in terms of forechecking and playing a hard game, a rugged game. Has a good motor and all that good stuff that we know that Barry Trotz loves.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that a little bit. And I think we talked a little bit, maybe before Boyd got it, and it might have been just when he was entering. I don't know. Either way, I think, Chad, you and I were talking about how we don't really see a long-term future for him on this roster as far as being, one of the anchors moving forward. But as far as the upcoming year and maybe, longer term, or maybe longer term, I don't know. Either way, as far as this particular year goes, I could see potentially, a bottom 6 role for him.
Well, there's a lot of open slots and competition to be had in the bottom 6, particularly speaking when it comes to some of these wing positions for the Predators. I mean, we can assume that at least going into it, Zachary Leroux's spot is safe. We can assume that Eric Hollick, since they traded for him, is safe. But as Boyd just said, you got to go with the better player who's playing better. Yeah. But just going into the season, you would expect Eric Holla, Zachary Leroux to be in there. Cole Smith will be in there. But that one little spot where you see Matthew Wood occupying in Daily Faceoff's projected lineup, I think that's a very open, up for grabs spot that's going to be really interesting to watch and see unfold when we do get that first lineup announcement going into opening night of 2025-26.
And I think that's one of those spots you could see a bunch of different guys roll into over the season.
And then the same goes for the defense as well. I mean, your Nick Blankenbergs are going to be battling in training camp to say I'm the guy, even though I think he has a little bit of a leg up in that competition because he's already proven it to the team last year through a very difficult year for the team. Nick Blankenberg showed up, and so he's already got a leg up in that competition in training camp, but now he's got to show it again. But I would say that there's maybe even 2 spots up for grabs for the Predators going into training camp. Once you take out Roman Josi, Brady Shea, Haig, and Perbix, you got Adam Wilsby, who we all hope that he can make it happen because he's a future piece. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of fun, open competition in training camp. I can't wait to watch it, honestly.
And what I was going to say on the Weisblatt front was, I'm not going to sit here and predict that he'll be a long-term piece for the future, but I do know Trotz has I know he's liked him pretty much since he's acquired him. He's talked about him well. He obviously traded him straight up for what's his face? I forgot. Yeah, Egor Afanasyev. I don't remember if the trade was 1-for-1 exactly, but either way, I knew Trotz liked him a lot. And like you said, Chad, he brings you a high motor, high energy to the bottom 6. A little undersized, but he can forecheck, do that stuff. And I think that, again, very much a guy I'm looking forward to potentially swoop in and take one of those spots in the bottom 6. Again, who knows if it's long-term, whatever. But as far as this upcoming year in training camp, I could, especially, he also provides some youth and speed down there, which you can't say there's a ton of.
And he's a 2-way contract, so you don't have to worry about losing him on waivers or anything like that. So you can kind of figure out what you have with him. And I think he's someone we're going to see in small sample sizes here and there regardless this season.
Yep.
Let's round out this episode. I want to get so Boyd, we opened the episode on a pretty really serious topic. I listened to the interview before we went live. So Spencer Stastny was on the 32 Thoughts podcast. First of all, just so much respect to Elliot Friedman and 32 Thoughts podcast for platforming Spencer Stastny and talk about such a really – it's a topic that hits home to me, but it hits home to so many people who just have been through this, been impacted by mental health and depression and the things that a lot of times people are just really afraid to speak out on it because they feel vulnerable. But I mean, did you get a chance, Boyd, to listen to the interview?
Yeah, I did. And, certainly echoing, the fact that, that he really hasn't talked about it, and then, has, both kind of the, I guess, bravery
Courage.
In a sense, the courage in a sense, and the willingness to walk into, one of the largest platforms in the hockey world and be, really honest and really forthcoming about what he was going through, what he was kind of putting himself through to a certain extent, and, what that was doing to him, and what, that was kind of, it almost forced him to quit the game of hockey entirely. He had his retirement papers written.
Yes. Yep. That was the part of the
had
interview
them with his agent.
That was the part of the interview that struck me the hardest, was when he said that it was time for him to sign his qualifying offer and he was not ready to sign it. And he said, I'll take retirement over making this decision right now. He saw hockey as almost toxic, like not like just he didn't want to play it, but he also didn't want to hurt his teammates. So he was making the ultimate selfless move of I'm not right now. Like he literally talks about in the interview that he was dreading going to the rink the next day. And he could, and he comes from a past. We don't want to ruin the interview for everyone, but he comes from a past. It's in his family or whatever. And so again, just putting yourself out there to be vulnerable is going to be so empowering to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are going to listen to this interview. And so that's what struck me the most.
Yeah. And I think, at the most basic level, just very, proud for someone like him to be part of the organization and be willing to take that step and say something, and tell a story that, as you said, Chad, is probably going to be very impactful for a lot of people. And then, from the hockey standpoint of it, the fact that he basically said he didn't train in the offseason for 3 years. And then he's like, I'd show up, a week before training camp, do a few skates, and off I went.
And the connection with Mark Borowiecki talking about just how he wishes he could have had some of the unique traits that Stastny has in his game.
Yeah.
And we, obviously learning this about Mark Borowiecki doesn't surprise any of us, because we know the man that Mark Borowiecki is and the mental battles, health battles that he fought. So to hear this connection, it makes me sad that he went through it, but it also makes me very happy that they were able to make that connection with each other.
Yeah. And it makes me very interested to see, a player like Spencer Stastny, who has so much physical capability,
so much
now in a better mental place to where he's actually been training and spending time on ice kind of with a purpose heading into training camp.
Yep.
What kind of player are we about to see?
And that can kind of round out our entire episode, guys. And I think it's perfect. It's a perfect way to round out this 2-hour episode. Is, we're talking about all these players that we can't wait to watch in training camp and risers. But really, I think the entire hockey world, whether you're a Predators fan or not, is not only rooting for Spencer Stastny, but we can't wait to watch him get on the ice and be in a better mental state and just get to actually enjoy hockey again, a sport that he's played his entire life. And whether I said at the beginning of the episode, I don't care whether he ever makes the team or not. I don't care. I just want to know that he's in a good place. No matter what he does, I'm always going to be rooting for this guy. No matter what he ends up doing in his career, even if it's outside of hockey. Always going to be rooting for this guy. And so we are going to round out episode 272 of Catfish. Let's go ahead, Max, real quick.
We can if we want to save an episode, that's totally fine. Do we have a few quick minutes for rapid fire?
Oh, yes. Let's do it. Yes.
Cool. All right.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, we got Titans time with Max because there's a lot going on in Titans world.
Yeah.
And Max needs to fill me in as well. I'm a Cam Ward guy.
Yeah.
So I want to hear from that. And I want to hear about Max. Also, can you, just for my benefit, can you touch on what happened with Will Levis and how he took the surgery?
Yeah.
So touching all that. You go ahead. Floor is yours, Max.
Yeah. So first I'll start with Will Levis, kind of getting it out of the way. So it was announced the day before training camp started that he would be out for the season. He was getting surgery on the shoulder that he injured. It happened officially last year, the game in Miami. He was out total cost him out a few weeks. He came back, aggravated a few weeks later. Honestly, never knew it was that bad until obviously he got the surgery. It was kind of a spit out your drink kind of decision. A lot of speculation is out there that, he did this on purpose, like, oh, he knew he was going to get the job, so he did this to spite the Titans. And maybe there's some element of like, you're not going to be, yourself, you're not going to be playing, maybe it's just best to, play it out with the shoulder, see how you're feeling, then decide with that. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate there too much. I just hope Will Levis is okay. As with Stasny, they're human at the end of the day. Will Levis, you want to hope he's okay. I will say I saw a picture of his shoulder that he posted the night before surgery. It looked pretty bad. So I'm not surprised seeing that he got the surgery. But ultimately, no matter his decision behind it, hope Will Levis is better. And hopefully he can, for his sake, he can come back for another team and eventually be good. But obviously he won't be playing this year at all. As far as this year's training camp goes, so real quick, as far as the injury front, I'll get it out of the way really quick. Lloyd Cushenberry is still out recovering from his Achilles injury from last year. L'Jarius Sneed is still recovering from the cleanup surgery to his knee, not the quad that kept him out for most of the year. That was made clear recently. Knee. I believe Brian Callahan or someone said they'll be back by next week, hopefully, when they have joint practice with the Atlanta Falcons. We'll see. I could be wrong, but I thought I heard that. Either way, as far as training camp itself goes, right now it looks like the defense is beating the offense. Cam Ward's had some decent days, some not so great days, although the latest practice, the offense was apparently so bad that Brian Callahan lit into them at the end of it with a profanity-laced tirade, which
we've seen that happen.
Which honestly is not a bad thing at this point. You kind of want to, get that out of the way early. And from what I hear, and Easton Freeze, who is one of the Titans reporters, he was on the Music City Audible podcast yesterday, which if you don't know who they are, listen to them. They're awesome dudes. But Easton Freeze is on there, and he's a media guy, so he's out there. He sees everything at practice, and he's telling us that they're putting a lot more on the players this year than they did last year. Apparently last year they wouldn't give them more than they could handle. This year they're throwing the kitchen sink at them.
Love it.
So yeah, that's a good thing right there.
Can I ask you real quick, Max? Can I ask you about Cam Ward? How you feel about his comments where he called the offense mid? Because that's getting a lot of headlines.
Yeah,
I love it.
Honestly,
he's walking in like he's a veteran. He's calling out the locker room. I love it.
Say it like it is, and right now you're getting all the kinks out of you. I have no issues with it whatsoever.
Cam Ward, he literally he commands the room like he's been in the league for 10 years.
I mean, he's already won over Calvin Ridley, who's a veteran in this league. So that's great. But as far as training camp battles, I'm not getting into too many battles, but I'll kind of get more of standouts. O-line is doing decent. So far, Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham are having great training camps. Dan Moore, the big free agency signing, has honestly been, is in the words of some, beautifully boring. Easton Freeze sent out a tweet the other day basically saying that the fact that we haven't talked about him is a good thing. And I kind of thought the same thing before that tweet. The fact that I haven't seen a ton of Dan Moore talk means that because a lot of times if you hear these offensive linemen's name, it's that they're giving up sacks. He's not doing that at an alarming rate. So we'll take that. Another guy, he won't start, but Jalen Duncan, who played pretty bad the first few years, couldn't stay healthy. Apparently he's doing well at training camp, so who knows, maybe he can be the swing tackle. So far, the standout of training camp, at least among the rookies, Kevin Winston Jr., the third rounder who fell because of a partially torn ACL, still ran a 4.5 at the combine, which is insane. He's playing incredibly right now. He's been lights out. He plays really fast. He has a lot of explosiveness. He's bringing all that. Jim Wyatt, the team's top beat reporter, keeps saying every day, like in time, he's going to be this team's number one safety, which is what you want to hear. They actually today just re-signed Quandre Diggs, who's Cam Ward's cousin. Now, if nothing else, this safety room is at least now deep. You got Amani Hooker, Kevin Winston, Xavier Woods, and Quandre Diggs. All guys, Amani Hooker is going to be the clear starter. But besides that, you got three other guys, at least assuming Winston pans out enough that you can put them on the field and feel okay about it, even if they're not total great starters at this point, especially Diggs at this point because he's older. One other thing I want to talk, one battle I do want to get into, it's the lower end part of the roster, Xavier Restrepo. I'm going to say right now, he's Cam Ward's buddy, and we felt good when he was signed, and he seemed to do well during OTAs and stuff. Not saying he's doing bad, but don't get too attached to him from what we've heard in training camp, because there are two big questions with it. Number one, will he do enough, especially on special? Will he do enough to make the team keep 7 receivers? And number two, if they do keep 7 receivers, will he do enough to convince them, especially on special teams, to supplant James Prochet, who he was brought in as a kick returner. He's done well in training camp. And I also heard this, I believe he's like John Fassel, a special teams coach. He's like his guy, which is going to, give him a little boost. And one thing I heard one argument I heard on the Music City Audible the other day, and it's an argument that I was kind of worried about, but made me kind of more convinced with not worry about Xavier Restrepo. If, like, say the Titans decide to not make him part of this 53-man roster, at least initially, say the Titans do expose him to getting claimed. Well, only a select few guys get claimed anyway, but if you think about it, he's Cam Ward's buddy. Cam Ward is clamoring to them the whole draft Restrepo. They didn't do it, but all to say, if even the Titans who have Cam Ward decide we don't want his buddy, what's that going to say to all other 31 teams thinking, do they want this guy? That's my thought, is you can probably stash him on the practice squad if you don't want him on the roster. But a guy like James Prochet, honest to God, I think with what he provides on special teams as a kick returner, he's a guy that's more likely to get claimed than Restrepo, because those are the kind of guys teams look for in, when training camp ends, when cut down day happens, guys that can contribute on special teams like Prochet can. It's, as the Titans have seen, getting consistent kick returners is clearly a challenge. And if you can get a dependable guy like James Prochet, that's good. So right now, if you had to put a gun to my head and make me decide, I think Prochet gets that 7th spot and Restrepo gets stashed on the practice squad.
Good stuff. I've got a much longer leash for the Titans and more grace for the Titans than I do the Predators at this point right now. But both franchises, interestingly enough, are going into for different reasons. They're going into seasons where, the overall expectations are pretty low, but the Titans at least did get the number 1 overall draft pick.
They seem like they have a direction.
It helps when you draft your franchise quarterback. I've never seen a number 1 overall pick in the NFL get so disrespected. But that's why I like Kyle Brandt so much of NFL Network. That dude's been beating the drum and calling out the media about the disrespect that they've given to Cam Ward. They hardly talked about the guy all offseason up when he got drafted. And I'm like, that's okay. And Cam Ward's like the type where he doesn't need all that. He's all business, man. He was already at practice at the facility probably 10 minutes after he got drafted. This dude is all business.
He's there at 5 a.m. and has to get kicked out of the facility at night.
I love it. I don't have high expectations in terms of them winning a ton of games, but I can't. It's apples and oranges comparing NHL to NFL when it comes to building a team and rebuilding and all that stuff. So I'm not going to even compare the two, but I am super hype actually about the Titans season. I'm hyped about both teams, but I'm really hyped about the Titans. Not because I think they're going to light the world on fire and be like some great team that beats a bunch of teams, but I like you just said, Max. They at least appear to have a direction that they're going in, and it helps when you do get to draft a franchise number 1 overall quarterback.
And
hopefully they can at least move from tragic to fun.
Whereas it takes a lot longer in the NHL to reap the rewards of draft picks. So it's not really a fair comparison.
Yep.
But either way, guys, this has been a lot of fun. We had a long off-season little break here since there's not a lot going on. But can't wait to get back into posting regular content for Catfish on Ice. And as Boyd knows, the door is always open. He's always welcome on. And we are going to sign off with that, with an extra long episode 272 that we just had. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you stuck around for the whole thing. Hit us up in the comments on YouTube and Facebook, or at Catfish Ice on X. And until then, probably the next episode we get to you, we will be much closer, very much closer to the season starting, at least in terms of training camp. We'll have more news to get into. But until then, enjoy the off season. To all of our fellow Smashville fans, we hope you're having a good summer with your family and friends and enjoying it. And before you know it, 2025-26 will be here, and we will be ready to react to it here on the show. So take care, everybody. This has been Catfish on Ice, part of the Hockey Podcast Network. We'll see you later.